Hi, this is Sean Perrin, and you're listening to episode 43 of the Clarinet Podcast, the show where I discuss all that's new and neat with clarinet with the neatest people in the industry. Today, I speak with Josh Redman, who is the Clarinet Product Specialist with D'Addario Woodwinds. We discuss Josh's role at D'Addario, what it was like studying with Kal Oppermann and Larry Guy, and, of course, we speak extensively about the new era of craftsmanship at D'Addario Woodwinds and how this mentality affects their reeds, mouthpieces, and other products. The giveaway for episode 42 and 43 is a D'Addario X25E mouthpiece, valued at approximately $99 US. If you haven't had the chance, make sure to head back to episode 42, which was with Tom Kamichek, also with D'Addario Woodwinds. If you'd like the chance to win this and other items mentioned on the podcast, be sure to go to clarinet.com and enter your email address in our email subscription box. This will also give you access to free content updates, special offers, coupons, and more. If you have any listener feedback or requests for upcoming shows, please do not hesitate to contact me directly at feedback@clarinet.com. Today's episode is brought to you by our sponsor, D'Addario Woodwinds. Sanding, shaping, balancing. For centuries, mastering your instrument meant mastering these crafts too. But now, D'Addario is refining craftsmanship for the 21st century by refining their reeds and mouthpieces with the world's most innovative techniques, so you can spend less time sanding, shaping, and balancing, and more time perfecting your own craft. To learn more about the new era of craftsmanship from D'Addario Woodwinds, visit D'Addario.com/woodwinds. So I'm here today with Josh Redman, who's the Clarinet Product Specialist for D'Addario and Company. Thanks so much for coming on the show today, Josh.
Thanks so much for having me, Sean.
So would you tell me a little bit about your role at D'Addario and sort of walk me through what a day is like or a week?
Absolutely. So my day-to-day really deals with managing our portfolio of clarinet products, and that includes both current products and products being developed. And it also entails overseeing a lot of marketing initiatives. So a day can differ really drastically for me. I could be traveling and at a trade show. I could be working on a very nitty-gritty packaging migration project. I could be working with an artist developing a reed or scoping out the needs of a reed, or just working on a marketing project, working with a clinician or working on some kind of ad campaign. So it really differs from day to day.
So do you focus specifically on clarinet then?
I do. I mean, my wonderful colleague, Kristen McKeon, handles our saxophone products. And then we have some overlap because we have some products that are for both clarinet and saxophone. So we kind of just split the clarinet and saxophone portfolios. And then for the rest of the products, we just deal with them on an as-need basis. So, for example, I'm working on migrating our accessories packaging right now, some of our accessories. So H ligatures and mouthpiece caps. And she's working on some straps right now. So it just depends on, we kind of divide and conquer. We work really closely together.
No, very cool. And so it's great because you're also a clarinet player. How do you feel that helps you with your role?
You know, it's really vitally important for the work that I do because not only am I developing products for clarinetists, but I'm constantly working with clarinet teachers and clarinet influencers and players. And it's a really important part of my job to understand as a player myself what's kind of needed and what's currently available and how we can be different and innovative. And just to be able to, I mean, sometimes my job involves going to a nearby middle school and giving a presentation myself and giving a pedagogical workshop. And it's super helpful to be able to do those situations myself and manage other people that do those for me. It helps me manage people and to do those things better, and really lets me understand what's needed from my employees and from my colleagues and from the people we work with.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. So in addition to your work at D'Addario, you're also maintaining an active teaching and even playing schedule. And you live in Long Island, is that correct?
I do, yeah. I do quite a bit of teaching. I actually, it's probably my favorite thing. I was very lucky to study with some great diagnostic pedagogues. I studied with Larry Guy in high school, who's written some great books, and I was lucky to be the last student of Kal Oppermann's, and he's just kind of known as a really great, not only an author, but just a kind of a die-hard diagnostic pedagogue. And so I kind of have a niche with high school and college students locally that come to me to work on fundamentals, and I really love doing that work. So
That's amazing. Do you have a story you would share about working with Kal or with Larry?
Yeah, both of them are just really, really wonderful people. Kal was kind of a very much a character, and he was my first lesson was 5 hours long, and I think for the first 2 hours I only played one note. Like, we only worked on making an entrance. He called it making an entrance, like starting the attack. And I had thought, I came to him when I was 19, or I think I was 19. I studied with him from 19 to 21. Actually, I studied with him until he passed away. And he was, I mean, it was grueling. It was absolutely grueling work. But he just cared so much about his students so blindly. And I remember, like, we finished that lesson. I was kind of like very fatigued, and he told me to give him a call and check in with him. And I figured, that just meant call him for my next lesson. So 2 days go by or 3 days go by, and I was actually at home from school for the semester, and it was like a break or something, and I had gone to bed early, and my mother woke me up, and she's like, it's Mr. Oppermann on the phone. And I said, oh, okay, well, give me the phone. And I perked up real quickly, and I said, oh, hello, Mr. Oppermann, how are you? And he goes, I told you to call me. And he had this classic kind of raspy bark. I told you to call me. And I said, oh, I didn't know you meant quite literally. And he said, I need to know how your staccato is going. How is the staccato going? And then, so basically that kind of, I learned very quickly that he meant literally to call him every 2 or 3 days. And he wanted to be able to check in to see how things were going. And it was very critical work, like lots of rehabilitation on fundamentals. And so he would want to actually hear you over the phone sometimes, or just hear what was giving you problems, or what you were doing well with, or whatever. Just a very unusual teacher, and just a very brilliant man. So I'm very lucky to have studied with him.
He must have had such passion. He obviously has such a wide published repertoire of books. It's so funny you share that story. Michael Norsworthy on episode 2, I believe, shared a similar one of intensity of studying with him, and it's interesting to hear, because nowadays a lot of teachers, I think they're so bogged down with their schedule that that hour that you're there is kind of the only hour that you have with them. But
exactly.
How do you think he made that work, as far as putting that kind of effort and passion and intensity into all his students?
There was just no other way for him. Anything less was not real. And he kind of, lived in his own little world in a way, but it was a really beautiful world to be brought into. And it's kind of what I try to adopt in my own teaching, although I live in kind of the modern confines of modern day, right? I have a way full-time job. I'm teaching a bunch of students, doing a little bit of playing. I have a rental property, I live a modern life, and it's hard to put yourself, when you're cramming your schedule in, it's hard to be able to give that amount of time to every student. But I find myself going over a lot with students and not really expecting anything in return. And some people are really appreciative, and some people aren't really appreciative. And some mothers, want to get dinner on the table, and it's tough. And Kal the difference between Kal and us today is that Kal didn't let that bother him. He operated under Kal's rules and Kal's world, and that was it. If you didn't want to follow, then you didn't study. But this is what he was going to give you because this is what he believed in. And there was something that was really beautiful about that intensity and passion. And it's funny you mentioned Michael, because Michael is actually the one who sent me to Kal and recommended that I study with Kal. So
Oh, wow.
it's a nice little the clarinet world is a very small one, as you know.
Well, I mean, I think everyone who did study with Kal has gone on to become a fantastic player. So I think he's obviously was doing something right.
He certainly was. He certainly was. Yeah.
Have you, Larry Guy? He has a fantastic interview on Ed Joffe's podcast. Have you checked that out?
Yes, it's quite wonderful. And Ed Joffe's one of our artists, so I've known Ed for a long time too. But Larry was wonderful for me in high school. I studied with him in the city. I'm from Long Island, but I used to schlep in to study with him in the city, and he was great with fundamentals and just a really hands-on teacher. And we're still good friends. He asked me to kind of take a look at one of his drafts of his new articulation book, which is fantastic. So that I got to contribute a little bit to that and bring in some of the ideas I've gotten from other teachers. And he's so good with. He writes books, has all of these people contribute and bring their ideas in. And I think he's in like the 8th edition of the Embouchure book. Right now, he's constantly updating and editing his works and putting out new editions. And I just think he's just a fantastic guy, fantastic teacher.
Yeah, again, such passion and knowledge and dedication. It's really commendable.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. He's had some fine students too. The new principal of the Met, Anton Rist, was one of his students in high school. So a lot of us who grew up in this region are very lucky to have Larry in the area because he's just doing great things for especially for young clarinetists, giving them a really great foundation, which is not easy to do and commendable work.
Yeah, no, the New York area must be just incredible to live in. It's so vibrant. I was talking to Tom about that too, actually. So,
it's a great place to live, no doubt.
So, anyways, I feel like this could be another full episode here with your stories and your work as a clarinetist. But so maybe we'll have to have you back. But so back to D'Addario a little bit. What are some of the challenges at your work that you've had to face in your role, and what were the relevant solutions for those challenges?
Yeah, absolutely, great question. So. What we deal with a lot is, I say, in terms of challenges, both marketing challenges and product challenges. So the marketing challenges are actually something I deal with a lot. It's probably the bulk of my role. And I think what that has to deal with is how do we get the word out about our products, which are relatively new products, and how do we have people consider these products as a viable option? And I also deal with product challenges, though, too. And that's really how do we produce products that are meeting the needs of a market in a different and or better way. So basically, my staple explanation of this is imagine if there were only ever one brand of toothpaste for years. Then all of a sudden, in walks a new brand that offers a slightly different perspective, slightly different product offering. My job is not only oversee how those products are designed and produced, but also to figure out how to expose people to these products and try them with an open mind. So I always say, if you had only tried Colgate toothpaste your whole life and you try Crest, it could work for you. It could not work for you, but it's different. It's a different product offering. And if we didn't have a different product offering, it would allow Colgate to kind of ride on their laurels, right, and not get any better. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't be good for people that don't know that maybe Crest might be a little bit better for them. And it might not be. And that's kind of what I say is that the marketing challenge for us is people are so used to what's currently available on the market in terms of reeds, and we're making reeds and mouthpieces in a different way. And what I always encourage and urge people to do is just to try it with an open mind. And lots of times they find, well, this might be a different, better solution for them, and it might not be. But kind of my challenge, my number one challenge usually is figuring out ways to get people to objectively evaluate and try our products and consider them with an open mind.
Well, they say a rising tide raises all ships, and it is one of the beautiful things about competition is it does keep everyone on their toes, and it results in better stuff for everybody.
It's one of my favorite things because honestly, I like to think that what we're doing with production and with our new machinery and with trying to improve consistency in reeds and mouthpiece products for clarinet and saxophone is really just going to push everybody else in that direction as well, which only does better for us as musicians. And my colleague Kristen and I always like to say, and Tom as well, that we like being musicians first and foremost when we put our feet on the floor in the morning, and we're really working for our peers and for ourselves and making sure that we can offer a different, better product for our customers, but also that our pushing innovation forward is only going to urge everybody else to do the same.
So what do you think it takes to design great products then? I mean, you mentioned innovation, but passion, anything else?
Great products come from really, truly understanding the need of the person you're designing the products for. So first, understanding who are you designing for, who are you targeting, and then what is it that they need? And then from there, you have to understand what's currently available to them. And then from there, what's good about that and what's bad about that. So before we design any product, there's an extensive amount of research that goes into it. And basically what I do is we're working on the bass clarinet reed right now. We're actually finishing up. We'll be migrating to a new D'Addario Reserve bass clarinet reed, upgrading from the old Rico Reserve version. And when I started that project, I did a lot of interviews with people that use our stuff, with people that don't use our stuff. I spoke to them on the phone. I got an impression of what is it that they like about their current reed? Do they wish, if anything, were different? And from there, I put together what's called a scope document and basically say what we need to achieve with that product. So really, to answer your original question, to design great products, it's imperative to know the needs of the market and who you're developing for.
So maybe an offshoot question then that I just sort of was thinking about here is, okay, you've designed this great product for these people, but how would you define great marketing then? How do you get this to those people?
That's a very good question. So marketing, ideally, from my perspective, is multi-pronged. So we use a lot of different vehicles, and I think some of those vehicles are just necessary to create an initial impression of what you're doing and to keep people aware of what you're doing. So that's things like print ads in magazines and social media content and advertising, and any digital or web banner ads or Google AdWords or any of that stuff. So that's kind of your basic. We're a brand and we're producing stuff, and we want you to keep our name of our brand and our products on your mind and knowing what we're doing and that we exist. And then a lot of what we do in this industry has to deal with what I call grassroots and what a lot of people call grassroots marketing. And that has to deal with working with key players and influencers one-on-one in some capacity. So whether that's what Tom does with artist relations, in that there's a group of people that are quite passionate about the products that we're making and have agreed to endorse our brand and endorse our products. And a lot of those people are teaching people or out in the world and meeting people through master classes and clinics and whatnot, and they're touching people and urging them to try new products, and to maybe somebody that has not looked at our brand as a viable option in the past might hear a great performer and see a great performance and think, oh, well, maybe I should try that. So That's one example of grassroots. Another example of grassroots is like our program that my colleague Kristen and I run, which is called the Woodwinds Method Program. And what that does is that employs a bunch of part-time regional clinicians around the country that go into schools and go to colleges and present workshops on our product. And that's something, again, that's more grassroots, that's reaching the masses. It's reaching students and teachers that are relying on these products in school bands and chamber music and whatnot. So for me, great marketing in this industry has to deal with a strong mix of your bread and butter. We're keeping a brand presence alive. And then additionally, really savvy, really present grassroots marketing, meaning one-on-one interactions with people, either through influencers or directly from our company, trade shows, etc.
Well, yeah, I think it's very commendable how you guys are trying to sort of get the word out there, and even, for example, with this podcast, like I've so much appreciated the support, and it's allowed for really 40 episodes of this show to be produced now, and but every episode people are they are hearing that message, and I hope that they are checking out the video and things that you guys have about your new products now, which we will get to in a second. But
absolutely, yeah. Well, we appreciate your support too, and what you're doing for the community is really great because we don't have a lot of this, and it's important. It's important.
Well, it's so fantastic to just be able to even to speak to someone like you, and for students who are wondering which kind of reeds do I purchase, to hear the behind the scenes and from someone actually there. I mean, I think it's so interesting for that perspective, and I'm happy to share it with people.
Well, I think that's great. And also the other thing is that a lot of students don't realize that people might want to pursue music, but they don't consider music business as a viable option, or they just don't know about it. So really important thing, like for whether you work directly at a company full time like I do, or there are potentials for consultant work and part-time work and endorsements and all kinds of things like that are an important part of building a freelance career if that's something that a student is interested in. So my colleague Kristen and I are big advocates of promoting business of music as a viable career option too.
No, absolutely. And when you're a student too, or even now, really, I mean, you look at these big companies sometimes, and it's hard to see the individual faces within such a large company, and it's hard to even feel like you can reach out. So just to have conversation and be able to meet these people is so great.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned the the D'Addario Method program, and you also mentioned your work on the reserve-based clarinet reed and a few other things. I would like actually for you to go into the method program a little more in a moment, but I am also interested, like, what is your most proud or most, I guess the product you're most happy to have worked on or been a part of at D'Addario?
I think that the answer to that question is the D'Addario rebranding of the reserve clarinet offerings a few years back when we upgraded the machinery and we upgraded the packaging. It was a really exciting development process mainly because from a purely product standpoint, we were using machinery that basically increased our potential to iterate by like 20 times. So our previous machinery, we could basically only iterate about one or two different versions of a reed a week. And now we can iterate between 10 and 15 different versions of a reed per day. So if you just think about that fact, we were able to do so much more when developing and improving those cuts when we were back to, I believe, 2 years ago now, almost 3 years ago, when we relaunched Reserve as a D'Addario offering. So that was really exciting from a design and product standpoint, but also really exciting from a marketing standpoint because it was such a drastic change. And we did a very cool beta sampling campaign in which 15,000 clarinetists got the chance to try these reeds before they were launched. And it was a very timely initiative, but it ended up being a very exciting one and a very effective one. So I think from both a product standpoint and a marketing standpoint, that was probably a very exciting project I worked on, and probably one that I'm most proud of. And the reed I use normally is the Reserve Classic, the D'Addario Reserve Classic reed. So I'm kind of a fan of that one.
So before we move on to touch on the products entirely and really kind of dig deep with them for a few minutes, would you share a little bit of information about the D'Addario Method program? From what I understand, that's a sort of a complimentary clinic, masterclass type situation for schools in more than 24 cities now.
Yes, absolutely. This is kind of the pride and joy of myself and my colleague, Kristen. It was an idea we came up with now 4 years ago, and it started life as one lone person in Houston, Texas, and has grown to, we now employ 48 part-time consultants that work for us and perform clinics. And like you said, basically, this program is in various regions throughout the U.S., and actually, we also have 5 clinicians abroad in Europe. And so all of these clinicians are out presenting workshops in various capacities, whether that be in schools, whether that be at music stores, might be in college studio situations, and depending on the region. And they're doing this is offered completely complimentary as a completely complimentary service for the educator or for the host. And the obviously the clinician is compensated, and they are able to present a pedagogical workshop of whatever the choosing of the educator or the host, and also to do so and incorporate our products as a component of that pedagogy. So what we deal with a lot in various regions, for example, is we'll send a clinician in and they'll coach music or coach whether it be ensemble music or solo and ensemble music. And then within that, they'll be able to take a look at the current equipment that's being used, administer a class set of mouthpieces in various facings and reeds in various strengths and cuts, and be able to work with the teacher and the students to come up with an equipment setting that might work better for the students. And basically, the premise of this program is not only are we sending great people out to give these workshops for free that are benefiting music education, but we're also enabling a teacher to see if by chance their equipment offering could be improved. If not, they've gained a great clinic, so it's no skin off of anybody's back. But if so, there might be a potential to make a student and make an educator's life easier with an equipment change and equipment choice that they might not have known about. So we kind of love this program because it's basically a win-win for everybody. We get to be considered as a potential option for a lot of places that wouldn't even know we exist if we didn't do this work and weren't so active in these communities. And the teachers and the students benefit by not only getting potentially better equipment, but also just by having a really world-class clinician come out and give a workshop with great pedagogical information in it. So we have a range of people that we just adore, my colleague Kristen and I. From we have performers that are performing and regularly with major symphonies. We have university professors. We have just such a wide mix of people, lots of private teachers, just a fantastic array of human beings and performers around the country that are working with this program. And we just love it.
So you obviously bring along a selection of products, and do the students get to try samples of reeds and things like that, or?
Yeah, they get to actually perform the clinic on a mouthpiece if they're a clarinetist, and they get to keep any reed samples they use. Everybody gets to try reeds, and they get to keep any of those reed samples. But yeah, they get to try everything, and the clinician gets to tailor the product offerings to whatever the needs of the student and the teacher are. So it's really hands-on and one-on-one.
So what percentage of it then is focused on trying the products, and which percentage is generally focused on like just getting into the sort of nitty gritty of the education and the music and the teaching?
Well, that's kind of the beautiful thing, is that it's really incorporated in the equipment as a pedagogical component of the clinic.
Oh, okay.
So it's basically, I would say, probably 20% product, and the rest of it is really pedagogy. But like I said, that equipment and trying that equipment is directly linked with trying to increase fundamentals and to get better sounds and to get better technique and better intonation and all of those things. So it's kind of the basis of this program, why we call it the Woodwinds Method Program, because it incorporates equipment as a component of pedagogy.
You know, it's so funny, that number you just said, 20% on the equipment and approximately, and that aligns perfectly actually with sort of my philosophy, which I'm not actually sure who had said this, but you know, the playing is 80% the player and 20% the materials, but you can't go that extra 20% without the right sort of materials.
Exactly.
You know?
I think that's brilliant. I think that's brilliant.
And you know, it's funny because I was just thinking to myself here, I just got back from a weekend. I taught 20 workshops, 21-hour workshops in under 48 hours. It was just a real grind.
I love it.
But yeah, so you end up talking about the equipment a lot. And it's one thing to show someone a reed and a mouthpiece, but it's another thing to have one there for them to try and experience for an hour.
Exactly. And it's so great that somebody can be there to hear, well, maybe this student would benefit from a more resistant reed or a less resistant reed, or a more resistant mouthpiece or a less resistant mouthpiece, based on what's coming out of their horn. And it's, you know, it's great. They're all, we have a big training summit for all of them each year at the factory. We fly them all out. They get really, really thorough training on every aspect of what we do. And they become experts on our equipment line, so they can really diagnose issues and distribute equipment according to whatever they're sensing as a clinician. So
speaking of flying and travel, you just got back from China. Would you share a bit about that trip?
Absolutely, yeah. So I was at the Shanghai Music China show first, and then I was visiting some of our distributors in China and working with them and meeting some Chinese clarinetists, and just trying to make sure that I'm keeping rooted in global, what the needs of the global market are. We were talking earlier that's a big component of my job. Mm-hmm. It's funny because one of the interesting things about what we do is we're a global company. So not only I focus mostly on marketing here in the States, because this is our home base and this is where I live, but I'm focusing on building products for the entire world. So it's important for me to keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on over there. So the Music China show is ginormous and bigger than the NAMM show here in the States. If any of the listeners know about that show, the National Association of Music Merchants, quite a large show for retail music. And it's basically a once a year big bash. And Shanghai in China is the same way. It's just probably even larger and a little bit more global focused. And so I was there with our company in China. And then, like I said, afterwards I got to fly to Beijing, spent some time on the Great Wall of China, which was a lot of fun, and got to work with Chinese clarinetists and got to work with our distributors to make sure they know about our newest products and to make sure that their staffs are adequately trained. I had a translator because obviously I don't speak Mandarin, so yeah, it was a great trip. It was a great trip.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. You've just done some real interesting work with D'Addario, and I'm really fascinated by all that you've done there, actually. This segues perfectly into I wanted to focus a little bit on the products themselves. And mm-hmm. you mentioned you go to these global shows and talk about them to sort of the general public. Would you give us sort of the overview of the D'Addario product line, as if we sort of just walked up to the booth and we're trying to decide whether to start at the orange box Ricos or the red box reserves?
Absolutely. So basically, our goal is to, and we're working on making sure that's a little bit more simple to understand for consumers. Right now, it's an ongoing task of mine. But basically, if you think about our general product line, we have offerings for students, and we have offerings, both reeds and mouthpieces, and we have offerings for advanced students and professionals. So if you break it into those two categories, on that bottom rung, we have our Rico by D'Addario and our Royal by D'Addario options. And Rico and Royal are both designed with a thinner vamp profile, and that's really designed for a beginner to be able to achieve really immediate response. Rico and Royal reeds feel half a strength softer than professional reeds of the same strength. So if you were to take a 2.5 reserve, it would feel more like a 3 in a Rico or Royal option. And then Royal is a slight step up from Rico. It features a French file mark for a little bit of increased clarity. So you've got those two offerings on your bottom rung there. And then above that, you've really got your reserve options. So that's for our advanced students and our professionals. And there are areas of our country, and I'm sure there are areas of your country, where people are starting on quote-unquote professional equipment, and sometimes they're stepping up. They're starting on a quote-unquote beginner equipment and then stepping up. It's really a matter of preference of the educator and the student. But within the Reserve family line, we have Reserve, which is that blue box, which is a traditional blank offering. And I like to say very simply that offering provides a very clear, dense sound. And then you also have our Reserve Classic offering, which is a thicker blank option. And that's going to give you a little bit more complexity of sound, tonal cover, and richness. So it really is a matter of personal preference of what people prefer. I always give the example that our friend Andrew Mariner, who's the principal of the London Symphony, really prefers the reserve reed, whereas other artists like Richie Hawley here in the States prefers the reserve classic reed. So it's really just a matter of preference, though reserve is typically priced a little bit under reserve classic. And so I think for many years students have lean towards using a more traditional blank offering, not only for the price, but also because it provides a really clear sound. But that's basically our clarinet product offering in terms of reeds. We also have some kind of more peripheral brands like our Mitchell-Lowry reed, which is an old mainstay, really basically an intermediate option. It's similar to a Rico cut, but has a little bit more density in the spine, which gives the student a little bit more resistance as they're growing. But that's really our reed options for clarinet. For mouthpieces, we have an array of mouthpieces from our X0 offering down to our X25E offering. And as that number increases, basically your resistance level is increasing. On more open facings, a lot of people feel that you get a little bit more flexibility of tone color as well. So our first three offerings are 0, 5, and 10, our X0, X5, X10. Those are quote-unquote American options because they're pitched at 441. And then we have our X10E, X15E, X25E, which are all pitched at 442. So we like to say they're for regions abroad. But we have many great artists that use E-series mouthpieces in this country, and we have many artists that are using non-E-series mouthpieces elsewhere. So you can make it work. Eventually, we'll have many more offerings, hopefully, and in both E-series and non-E-series.
So the E is what marks it as international, then?
Exactly.
Okay. Is
exactly.
that like kind of European pitch, then? Is that what it means?
Exactly. That's what we call it, European.
So there would be a standard X25 coming out at some point?
It's a very big possibility, yes.
Oh, okay.
It's just we have so much work to do. It's all good. It's just right now we're working on other projects for saxophone, and so we're limited in the amount of of mouthpieces we can develop at one time. So eventually there's quite a few more offerings I'd like to put out. And it's all on my radar. It's just a matter of time.
So I do want to go back to the reeds for a moment, but before we do, the X25E mouthpiece is going to be the giveaway on today's episode.
Oh, awesome.
What would you like to say to the person who does win this product?
Well, it's, I just got back from China, and it's a great mouthpiece offering. It's a relatively open mouthpiece offering with a 1.25 tip opening. It's a long facing. It makes it a little bit more approachable. It's got a lot of nice color flexibility. It's got a lot of nice richness to the sound. You would pair it with a softer strength reed. You can really make any mouthpiece option work for you by pairing it with an appropriate reed strength. Mm-hmm. So typically on more open facings, we would use slightly lower reed strengths. So to whoever wins this mouthpiece, it'll be a really great addition to their arsenal. Really nice color and really preferred by a lot of folks in Europe. And like I said, quite a few Chinese teachers were really a big fan of the X25E. So.
Yeah, I've been using it. I got a trial one in the spring there to do a review on, which I will get out shortly. But I've been using it almost exclusively. I really, really like it. But the pitch is a bit high, so my solution was just to add a 1mm tuning ring to my barrel, and
yes,
then it seems back to normal. But it's great. I've been playing on very soft reeds with great flexibility and sound and response and volume. I've been really impressed by it, actually.
That's awesome. That's awesome. In Canada, are you mostly guys playing at 440 or 442 or what?
Most people here play at 440. This mouthpiece kind of caught me at an interesting time because I was doing a project with marimba and I was trying to get up to 442 anyways. So when I paired when I paired it with a slightly shorter barrel, it was like bang on.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So it worked really well. But when I want to play it in a normal setting, I just use my standard 66 and I toss in a 1mm tuning ring, and I'm pretty much exactly in tune. It's great.
That's great. Yeah. I remember when I had to play in a CC in our D'Addario clarinet choir, and I was so worried about playing at 442. I remember I downloaded the tuning CD at 442. It ended up not being a big deal. I feel like our ears sometimes help us out when we're in the moment, but I was so worried about it. I used a shorter barrel. So funny.
Well, it's interesting. I also have a selection of other mouthpieces, of course, which clarinet player doesn't. And I've found that I have some that are tuned high and tuned low or whatever. But I like the feel and response of the higher pitch mouthpiece better when it's paired with a longer barrel than the lower pitch mouthpiece paired with a standard barrel. It's kind of weird.
I actually kind of agree, and that's part of. I get this question all the time: why we pitch our American mouthpieces at 441. And the very simple answer to everybody I usually say is it's better to be higher than lower. And what we wanted to avoid was going out someplace cold and not being able to play in tune with piano. And I mean, what ensemble does anybody know that's actually playing at 440 all the time? So to be able to be a little bit higher, and you can always go lower, but it's a little bit harder to go the other way.
Yeah, it's easy to add a tuning ring or pull out the barrel a millimeter.
Exactly.
It's a little harder to grab your hacksaw. And
I love that.
So let's go back to the reeds a little bit. I want to talk about the whole new era of craftsmanship in a little more detail.
Absolutely. So basically what we're doing at D'Addario is really exciting. So we've always, since we acquired Rico back in 2004, we very shortly after that incorporated a digital blanking machine, which automated the blanking process. And basically, that's the process of taking the split, which is 1/4 of the cane tube, and then turning that into a flattened reed, pre-reed, let's call it, before it gets the top half of the reed, which is called the vamp, cut off and into that designed portion. So that we've had for quite a while, which was which was great for us and helped a lot with the consistency. But we were using habitually machinery that most other reed manufacturers use. We call them the Franck machine. And basically that's a machine that works kind of like a key cutting machine and goes back and forth, back and forth. And it's kind of an inherently variable process, one that requires a lot of adjustment. We employ 4 quality control musicians at the factory that are constantly checking reeds off the line. And they're doing that with the new machinery too. But it was always kind of a bit of a burden for them to need to constantly monitor those machines. So we decided, being D'Addario and really loving innovation and trying to add more consistency to these products that are so inherently inconsistent for a lot of clarinetists and saxophonists, is to finish the last phase of this automation and to put out a machine that does our vamping process, the top half of the reed, digitally. And so we call that very simply our digital vamping machine. And what that does is it uses circular cutters, and it's all computer controlled. And we can make reeds faster, and they're way more accurate. And the best thing, like I spoke about earlier in this interview, is that we can now iterate so much more quickly. So if we need to change the tip a little bit, whether we're designing or whatever, we can do that in, the course of 30 minutes, whereas it used to take us almost a week to make a different iteration in the past, because we had to make a new, I call it a mold, but it's called a cam. It's basically a metal mold that the reed sits on top of and gets cut into that shape. So, yeah, so it's pretty crazy. And basically, this new reed machinery is being used in reserve and select jazz right now, but eventually it's going to be used on all of our reed lines. We now have 3 of these machines. We're working on another one. And it's really quite amazing. So if anybody wants to see these machines in action, we have a new video out that kind of chronicles the process, and that's available on our YouTube channel if you want to check it out.
So I'm actually going to put a link to that in the show notes, and I might actually do a separate blog post, but it's just so interesting to watch. And just so you're aware, if you do go to the website and click on any of the ads right now, they will also currently be leading you to that video. And it's really interesting. It sort of goes over the process and has some sort of interviews with some people who are involved. How does this new era of or this new design era, I guess, lead to consistency, or does it lead to better consistency?
So our new machinery lends itself towards consistency in 2 ways. The first is just that it's a much more accurate method of production, so that what we're doing is we're creating reeds that are in much tighter tolerances than they were in the past. So from reed to reed, the technical specifications of each reed are way more similar to each other. The second area that it impacts is strength grading. So the way that we determine strengths in a reed is by deflecting the tip and then assigning it a digital number. Once we assign it a digital number, we then decide what range of those digital numbers is going to incorporate each strength. And what we want is for the player to feel that a 3.5 feels like a 3.5, feels like a 3.5. And we do that by being very strict with our strength tolerances. So those 2 things are both the ways in which the new technology that we're using lend itself towards more consistency to the player and the artist.
So, there's 2 camps of people probably, and I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit, but I hear all this digital computer precision. It almost seems like computers are sort of the ones being hands-on with the reeds nowadays, and sort of there's sort of this touch lost from the artists themselves or something. I mean, I feel like someone could argue that point somehow. What would you say to that kind of comment?
It's a really good one, because a lot of us, especially as musicians, believe in handcrafting as being something that's great, right? We like a handcrafted bag or a beautiful handmade suit, and we think that these things are great. And for some of us, we might play on a handcrafted instrument that's a one of a kind, that's beautiful, and that's great. But for us, we wanted to be able to take this really extreme level of design and all of this beautiful incorporation from artists that we have and all of this many years of experience designing, and be able to take that and make it very repeatable. And so what that means is that somebody's going to experience a more consistent read with a great design that was made with using artisan help, right? We've used numerous inputs from top-notch artists, both clarinet and the saxophone world. And what we've done is we've worked with engineers to be able to take that great design and replicate it in a way that's very consistent. It's the same thing with mouthpieces. A lot of people will play on a hand-finished mouthpiece, and that's great. I mean, I've played on some amazing hand-finished mouthpieces, but we wanted to take a design that we really love and be able to, that was made initially by an artisan craftsman. Lee Livengood is the gentleman who has worked on a lot of our mouthpieces with us from a technical design standpoint, and take what Lee does and replicate that using CNC machine technology and make that very repeatable. So if you're hand finishing a mouthpiece, every one of them is going to be different. And if you have something, if you're buying it off the shelf and let's say you buy one of our X0s, you expect it to respond in a certain way. I expect it to respond in a very immediate way, to feel a certain level of resistance, to pair well with a certain strength range of reeds. Perhaps if I'm used to using that mouthpiece and I know exactly what reed strength I use on it, I should be able to pick one off on the shelf and put a size 4 Reserve Classic reed on it and have it feel similar. And that's just kind of what we were after, is that artisanship is fantastic, but if we're making a mass manufactured process, we're not doing anybody a favor by hand finishing every piece, because that means that every piece within a certain model is going to be inherently different. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah, and I do see the point of both camps in a way, but I really do see the value of the repeatability and scalability and consistency of machines. And, I feel like in some ways the craftsmen of the past, if they'd had access to these machines, there's no way they wouldn't have used them.
It's, I think that's a really good point too. And the thing is that when we were looking at the process for mouthpieces, we looked at what Shedville and Casper did back in the day. I mean, Shedville are arguably the greatest clarinet mouthpiece maker of all time. He was milling by hand, sculpting down solid rubber. So when we decided we were going to mass manufacture a mouthpiece, we wanted to do it in the same way, but we didn't want to do it by hand because we wanted to make it repeatable. But our process starts with solid rubber and then gets milled down. It just gets done on machinery. And the other thing to note is that we have not only myself and Kristen and Tom that work for D'Addario that are constantly available to try products if needed, but we employ 4 full-time quality control musicians that are there to make sure that the work we're doing is not only meets a technical spec, but also meets a playability spec. Because we've all, well, maybe not all of us, but I've tried products that said they were technically in spec, and I felt a difference. So it's important to also have that human element on hand to be able to try something as a musician. So that always makes me feel good about what we're doing, knowing that there are 4 fabulous, one of them Grammy Award-winning musicians at the factory testing reeds and mouthpieces to make sure that what we're doing on our machines is coming across from a playability standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you can always go along and hand finish it a little more, a little differently, but it's good to have a starting point that you know sort of what it is,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
This might be an obscure reference, but this whole talk about machines and sort of methods, it reminds me of, how Glenn Gould, the famous Canadian pianist, he was criticized somewhat for playing a lot of these pieces on the piano by Bach. And but he was also famous on record saying, I think that if Bach had had access to these kind of modern pianos, he would have been thrilled to not only hear his music played on them, but also just as thrilled to hear what Wendy Carlos is doing with synthesizers and all these different things. Like, why would he not have been?
I love that. A very crazy man, but a very brilliant man.
Absolutely. He actually spent some of his time in New York there. So, interesting. So yeah, one more thing. Let's say that we we've bought these new reeds, we're taking them home. How are they best cared for, and what level of importance do you put on humidification, and what's D'Addario's solution for that?
That's a really good point, and it's actually when we spoke about earlier about our strength grading process and how a 3.5 feels like a 3.5 within a box. Whenever you're trying our products, I urge everybody to try a number of different strengths because it's imperative. I think that a lot of people are used to playing a wider range of strengths, and so they might be used to playing softer or harder 3.5s within a box. And so when you're switching or evaluating our brand, I always urge everybody to try, like if you play 3.5, go ahead and give 3.5 and 3.5 plus a try, because you never know what's going to work for you. I have a lot of people that come from a previous reed brand and play 3.5 and play 3.5 in our brands. And then a lot of people play either harder or softer. So it's crucial to be able to try numerous brands, first of all, numerous strengths. So in terms of care, all reeds, I like to be very general because a lot of people have their own feelings on this. And whenever I go and talk about this in my travels, it's really important for me to be very vague, but to still address it. So all reeds need to be broken in so they're reacclimated to being wet and they're acclimated to vibrating. So a short amount of play time in the first few days of life will be best for your reeds. And then also from that standpoint, we need to be rotating our reeds when possible. Many of you listening will know this already. And then that's a good segue to, we make a pretty awesome product that a lot of people love, called our multi-instrument reed storage case, and that features two-way humidity control. So what that does is it both gives and takes humidity and creates an environment of whatever the number on the pack is. So for us, it's 72, and what it's going to do is it's going to create an environment of 72% humidity in your reed case, which is airtight. And it's going to allow your reeds and their life to be a little bit elongated and to make sure they're more stable in storage. It's a really cool thing. And it also fits 8 of any size reed. So from E-flat clarinet down to contrabass clarinet. So it's a very handy case.
So with those the Reed Vitalizer packs,
Mm-hmm.
how does that work exactly? Do you know more specifics on that? Tom and I were trying to figure that out, and we didn't
Absolutely. know. I don't know more than it's a combination of, it's a saline solution, and it's slightly porous outside wrapping, and so it enables it to pass through the moisture, so to both give and take. That's kind of the extent I know, because I had asked once what was involved in this, what was it made out of. I think I had a consumer complaint once that they had ripped it by accident and it had gotten over things and reeds, and were they safe? Was it safe on the inside? And from what I've been told is it's merely just a saline solution. It's just a chemical reaction of salt and water. So it's really, it's totally safe. But what it does is, unlike kind of a descant that just gives, it gives and takes. So you can actually, if you have a Tupperware that you can put a humidity sensor in, you can kind of get a sense of, put your reeds in there and put the reed pack in there and put your sensor in there, and you can see that it's creating that 72% homeostasis within your case.
So it would make sense then that they could somehow be rehumidified. Is that possible, or are they just something you should replace every once in a while? They kind of give up the ghost on it.
Yeah, I hear both things. We say, as the manufacturer, that every 90 days or so, the pack is going to harden up, and that means it's done. So it's time to replace. I say between 90 and 120. I know a lot of people that get like 6 months out of them. It depends on where you live and what the humidity level is like where you live. But other than that, I mean, it's it just depends on when it hardens up. Some people get a lot more time out of them. I know some people that have been using them for over a year. It just depends. If it's not hard though, it's still working, and if it's hardened, it needs to be changed.
So I wish I knew more about this exacting numbers, but what is the exact number that you would recommend for humidity of reeds and then also for humidity of the clarinet, and can they be stored together?
Yeah, absolutely. We only have now the 72% offering because we felt like the other two offerings that we used to have were not selling very well, and the 72% seems to be the favorite in terms of what it does. So I like that percentage personally, and that's was always my favorite anyway when we had the three offerings, and I just felt like that was a great humidity level for storage to keep them kind of stable and ready, kind of ready for play. They still need to be wet, but it just adds a nice stability to them. In terms of the clarinet, I use our company makes guitar humidity packs, and I use those because they're larger in my clarinet case, and they're slightly less humidity. So I wish I knew more about the specifics of like what humidity levels are great, but I believe though that's in the 48 region that I use in my clarinet case. It's whatever is available for guitars. And so that's what I use in my clarinet case. And then in my reed case, I use the 72.
Oh, okay. So they really should be stored separately then in that way.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know if it would be that harmful if you use a 72 pack in your clarinet case, but they're kind of small. So eventually one day I need to rebrand those guitar packs as a clarinet product with a clarinet storage solution so that they can be, so the market knows they can be used. It's on my very long to-do list. So.
Can those guitar humidifier, they're obviously not called the Reed Vitalizer. What are they called?
I think they're just called Humidipack.
Humidipack. Are they? You put them in the case, and do you have to somehow seal your case, or does the reed case breathe also? Like, how important is locking the air in?
You know, on the instrument case, I just throw it in there. So I don't think that my instrument case is airtight, but our reed case is airtight.
Oh, okay. So you could reasonably throw one of these in your instrument case and expect that it would still perform to some extent.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the same as, some people put orange peels. It's just kind of the only difference is that this is giving and taking. So it's creating.
It's an important point, actually, because one of the problems I had with the orange peels, I tried that when I was in university. I even made myself a little like pill bottle orange peel thing, but it was really hard to determine, when to change them. And if the humidity went too high, all of a sudden you're getting issues of mold and stuff. There was no control. It wasn't able to...
I think that's why ideally a lower humidity level for an instrument is probably better. I never had a problem with my guitar packs in there.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think some people should. I'm definitely going to look into those and check out if I can do that.
We'll send you some, Sean. No problem.
Okay. It's incredibly dry here. It is so dry. I think it's like 20% humidity right now, and I've actually got a humidifier in my house. I think most people here do, just to try and bring it up. It's super dry. So.
Ugh, yeah, not good for reeds.
Absolutely not. Well, thank you so much for sharing all this amazing information about not only your work with D'Addario, but D'Addario's products. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we move on to the lightning round?
I don't think so. I think we covered pretty extensively.
Yeah, we touched all the bases, I think. So fantastic. So the lightning round, this is just a quick 5 to 10 minutes to wrap up things, and each question is meant to be answered in a minute or less, but I'm not, who's counting, right? So the first one is, if I was to walk over to your clarinet stand right now, what would I find?
You find the first clarinet part to the Nutcracker because I have to play it in 3 weeks.
It's that time of year.
It is. And it's not easy music. No. And every year I'm like, I'm going to get that one passage I missed this year.
It's enjoyable, though. I like it. I do like to go
it's great.
It's great. So what is one book that you would recommend all clarinetists read? And this does not have to be a music-related book.
My first teacher was a Bernard pupil, and I absolutely love the Bernard Clarinetist Compendium. It's like a 5 to 7 page little pamphlet. I believe it's currently available from LeBlanc, but it might be out of print. But it's definitely, you could probably find a PDF copy online. It's a great read. It's probably the most comprehensive original treatise on articulation. So kind of the basic premise that our air is always going and the tongue interrupts that air column. It's like my Bible for teaching especially. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's available anymore, but it's interesting because I have about 10 copies of the original print that are just sitting around. So I wonder what's going on with that. But it's an interesting read. So if it's available, absolutely. I'll put a link to that up online, but I'll have to see.
Absolutely.
What is the best piece of advice you ever received and who gave it to you?
Hope and practice, but never hope more than you practice. Kal Oppermann.
That's a good one. So I know this is a difficult question, but what is your all-time favorite piece of music?
Very difficult question. Classically, I would say the Dvorak Cello Concerto.
Oh, interesting. So I feel like you were lucky and got a chance to work with some of your idols in music, but if you could go back and in time and meet any musician or composer, past or present, who would it be?
I thought a little bit about this, and I think my answer is Schubert.
No.
Because I think he literally wrote so amazingly for the clarinet, and he died so young. And I would love to meet him. And I always wonder what we would have gotten if he lived.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, in the last episode, at the time this airs, it'll probably be the last episode anyways, I just talked to Daniel Spreadbury from Dorco, the scoring software, and he was talking the same thing about Mozart, like he really wishes that he'd had the chance. I think it was Daniel. Man, I've done so many interviews lately. I hope it was. Anyways, so yeah, thank you so much for coming on. If people are interested in learning more about you specifically and also D'Addario, where can they do this online? Do you guys have Facebook, Twitter, all the things they can follow?
Absolutely. So D'Addario is D'Addario Woodwinds on Facebook, D'Addario WW on Instagram, and I believe D'Addario Woodwinds on Twitter. And then I am Josh Redman on Facebook, facebook.com/Josh Redman, Redman. And I do have a Twitter, but I never use it. I'm at Josh Redman on everything. I beat the saxophonist Joshua Redman to that handle on every social media platform, but I didn't buy the domain name. So He's got everything. He's got Josh Redman, Jay Redman, Joshua Redman. He's got everything. So.
All the domains. Yeah, that happens. Same thing with SeanParent.com. It was out for years to some doctor. And then one time I went to it and it was available. And I was like, what?
You got it.
So I picked it up and I got it. Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, thanks. This was a fantastic conversation. I'm going to put links to all sorts of stuff up as much as I can in the show notes there. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience before you wrap up?
No, just thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this, Sean.
Absolutely, and thank you so much from me at Clarinet here for all the support that D'Addario has offered. It was so great to meet some of the team down in Kansas, and hopefully I can get a chance to come out to New York and see you guys out there.
Oh, I feel so bad I missed you in Kansas. I normally run our booth presence at Clarinet Fest, but Tom did this year because my best friend got married. So.
Oh, that's a good excuse. I'll forgive you.
Yeah.
Are you going down to Florida?
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to try my best, so I might see you down there then. And if not, I'll try and get to New York at some point.
And Tom has been spreading the word. He says he has to replenish the Clarinet cards from the showroom all the time. So.
Oh, really? I'll have to send more down maybe. I've got some new pamphlets printed up, so.
Awesome.
So I'll have to send some your way. Well, thanks so much again, and this was absolutely fantastic.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks for listening to the Clarinet Podcast. If you'd like the chance to win items mentioned on the show, please be sure to head to www.clarinet.com and subscribe with your email address to our mailing list. You'll also receive free content updates, coupons, and more directly to your inbox. If you're enjoying the show, please consider subscribing and leaving a rating and review on iTunes or wherever you happen to listen. If you'd like to support the show directly, you can purchase your new and neat clarinet items at the Clarinet online store at clarinet.com/store. Or you can become a backer on Patreon at clarinet.com/Patreon. That's Patreon. Today's episode was brought to you by our sponsor, D'Addario Woodwinds. Sanding, shaping, balancing. For centuries, mastering your instrument meant mastering these crafts too. But now, D'Addario is refining craftsmanship for the 21st century by refining their reeds and mouthpieces with the world's most innovative techniques, so you can spend less time sanding, shaping, and balancing, and more time perfecting your own craft. To learn more about the new era of craftsmanship from D'Addario Woodwinds, visit D'Addario.com/Woodwinds.